everyone. I am Nellan Hunt here in New York for We News. Thank you so much for joining us. I have to admit that when I found out who our guest today was, I was excited. I was a little nervous because one doesn't get the opportunity to speak with someone as what's the word? As well-rounded and as auspicious as the man himself, Mr. Winston Dookeran. Mr. Dookeran, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
Very well, and thank you very much for your kind words, Nellan. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to meet once more.
Certainly. As I was saying to you before we started, after everything you have done, if I were you, I would just be looking forward to going down the road and getting some coconut water and reading the newspaper. But congratulations on your appointment as the Secretary General of Euclid. Could you tell me a little bit what the institution is? Because in checking, I see it's an amalgamation of institutions of higher learning.
Well, essentially, it's a online university being set up under a United Nations treaty, and it offers programs of training largely to diplomats and senior public servants throughout the world, but more specifically, it has grounded itself in Africa.
Right.
And I was very happy to have the opportunity when I was told that the main focus of Euclid University has been in Africa, because it's the nearest thing that I would have got to what was one of my earlier dreams, to work in Africa. So having joined Euclid just less than a year ago as the Secretary General, we began to expand the reach of Euclid to the Caribbean. So I have got them to join up with the Association of Caribbean States, and now their reach will not only be in Africa, but also will be in the Caribbean. So we have a wonderful platform to provide educational opportunities for people in Africa. And Africa is a big continent. There are many countries there, and we are focusing largely in the West Africa, but also in the East African countries, and now in Association of Caribbean States. Our job really is to provide online training and in very relevant fields, especially in the area of health development and international diplomacy.
So as the Secretary General, what's your typical day like now?
Well, it's not a full-time job. It's like an honorific position. Every so often, and that's why I live now in front of the computer, because that's how we operate. I will get a request. For instance, they want to honor someone with an honorary doctorate, and they're going through the process of evaluation. And I will get involved in putting my bit in that process. So it's not full time, but it takes time of me on the screen every day and in dealing with many other areas, especially when we are joining the Association of Caribbean States. I took the lead there because I was the only one from the Caribbean. Prior to my being on Euclid at this high level, it was really run by individuals from Pakistan, Africa, and United States.
So now you're in a position where you're involved with an organization that is basically retooling how people interact on the ground on a diplomatic level. And it's interesting that health is one of the things that you're involved with, particularly in Africa, particularly that it has been a situation where that has been such a focus because of the HIV/AIDS crisis, famine, and those sorts of things. It's as if Africa really needs the global involvement of the global community to really help them along to meet the needs of their citizenry.
Well, right now we are facing what has been described as vaccine diplomacy.
Ah,
And many countries have faced the wrong end of that diplomacy and access to the vaccine. Thank God that we have something in line now. Um, is now creating a new kind of diplomacy, and some countries are using it in order to create new friends and influence more countries. So that's a new issue right now, and Africa is at the heart of that because it is a country that will not be left back anymore,
yes, yes.
or the continent that will not be left back anymore.
Well, thank you so much for getting involved. I mean, I know you say it's an honorary position, but you have never done anything from a distance. So I know you've jumped in with both feet, so to say, to really make this something that is tangible and really helpful. And that was one of the, I would say, high points of many parts of your career. I don't think you have any one career, having been, governor of central bank, having been a politician. When did you say to yourself, I think I want to do public service?
Well, I think I've had many platforms, but one career.
Mm,
And my career has always been to get involved in making life better for those with whom I can play a part. And the only place I felt that I can play a real part was in the country where I was born, which is in Trinidad and Tobago. But I use different platforms. Sometimes it's the economic platform, sometimes it's the political platform, sometimes it's the academic platform, sometimes it is just the platform of silence, which is
ah,
a platform used very often in my career. But it is all for the betterment.
yes.
I apply those platforms wherever I can in the areas of my own competence and opportunities that do arise to make things better. So the Euclid offer that came to me was one such platform,
Hmm.
because I am now at the University of the West Indies, where I am, in fact, um, teaching with the Institute of International Relations. And my job there is to write, research, and teach. Very shortly, I will come up with a new book, which will be called Theory and Practice in the Caribbean Beyond COVID-19.
Very
I say it now,
interesting.
this is the first time I'm saying this in the public arena, but just to get you excited
Well,
that when it do come on the market, that I will get the opportunity to explain it.
oh, definitely. With that, we're going to take a very, very, very quick break because I want to come back and hear more about your life as an author as well. But everyone, stay tuned. I'm Nellen Hunt. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. I am Nellen Hunt for We News here in New York. We're speaking with Mr. Winston Dookeran, the current Secretary General of Euclid University and overall public servant of Trinidad and Tobago. How does that encompass everything?
Well, you seem to put things with the right words, I must
Ah,
say.
it's
You
easy
sum
when it's
things
true.
up.
It's really easy when it's true.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much. You talked about very briefly, and I know we can't get into detail because that's another interview about this book that you're reading. How do you come to the point where you decide, I need to write a book and compress all these ideas into this much pages?
Well, I said earlier that I use many platforms and I use a platform of silence.
Uh-huh.
And since I came out of active politics a few years ago, you're never out of politics. You're always in politics,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes you're vocal and sometimes you're not vocal. So I decided that I will use this new platform of silence to write. Then came the pandemic. We all know what it is, especially you in the United States. And it has changed the way people think about solutions in every aspect. They say it's a paradigm shift. And then I began to ask myself, well, what does it mean for the Caribbean? And when I started to write this book, of course, we are in the depth of the pandemic crisis. We are not seeing an opportunity yet of a vaccine. But I know that the paradigms are shifting. The Caribbean was standing still. And in economics, people are saying we have to find a new way of looking at economics. We have to find a new way of looking at monetary policy. We have to find a new way of looking at growth strategy. And in every aspect, we have to find a new way of securing the health security of our citizens. We have to find a new way to protect our vulnerable groups in the society from the ravages of such kinds of events occurring as they are and occurring again in the future.
Yes.
So, but then the question, what do you do to do that? You got to start by thinking it out. And your first step in changing anything is to think it out. And to think it out, you're required to do a little bit of research, reflection, and a little bit of introspection. And that is what led me into writing this. I collected a number of individuals, both in the region and outside the region, whom I had met and worked with over the many years, as you rightly said, over the substantial period of life in public service. I contacted them, some from Italy, some from the United States, one from Brazil, many from the Caribbean, at the University of West itself. And I put together a wonderful team, and I asked them whether they were willing to work with me to produce this book beyond COVID-19. Because we got to be prepared for the day when we will have to prepare for the next period. And they were kind enough, and each one of them got down to do the research with me. And for the last year, I got engaged in looking at, I'll give you an example. Governments are called upon to spend a lot of money in order to protect the people, especially the United States and in Europe, which has faced the highest problem, if you may wish.
Certainly.
And we too in the Caribbean. It changes the whole idea of how do you manage an economy. You can't use the old methods anymore. You can't say that you cannot go into debt because you have to go into debt.
It's inevitable.
But then how are you going to deal with the future? So it requires a whole new paradigm shift. And I said, let us prepare for that. And this book, I hope, when it do get onto the market, will begin to open up thinking of policy, public policy thinking in areas of economics and in areas of diplomacy. Those are the two areas that I have focused my life on.
It's interesting that you've mentioned how much vaccine diplomacy is important and now a part of our lives, and certainly with your new position. As with great power, there are so many people involved in the wheel that turns the language and the interaction of diplomacy. Is there a way for us to really be involved in a humane, human route towards the vaccine diplomacy situation that's going on now, so that we can really make sure we're as fair as possible with its distribution? Or do you think that we are now left to the major powers that be dictating throughout the world and the Caribbean how this language is going to be spoken? Do we have a voice there?
You have put your finger on the issue very well. There is no group or institution that has the responsibility to look at the issue of the distribution of vaccine to ensure that the process by which it will happen will be an equitable one, either in a global sense or even within a country. And therefore, you are at the whims and fancies of those who hold the power. And those who hold the power are those who have the resources to produce the vaccine or to purchase the vaccine. And those who do not have such resources are at the mercy of them. And that is why the World Health Organization, which was temporarily put in some kind of cold storage, if I could say so, although it continued to function, was the right place and the right institution to facilitate the role that you have so easily pointed out. And in terms of vaccine diplomacy, it is trying to regain its grounds.
Yes.
But not quite yet. Because individual countries are still doing what they think is right for their own domestic and larger foreign policy objectives.
Very, very interesting. Mr. Dookeran, we're going to take one more quick break before we continue this conversation. Thank you so much once again for joining us. You're watching We News. I'm Nellan Hunt. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to We News. I'm Nellan Hunt. We're speaking today with Mr. Winston Dookeran, the current Secretary General of Euclid University, about so many interesting things. And you talked about the vaccine, the diplomacy of the distribution, and the language that would be used to ensure that it gets to everyone that needs it. Your book, Beyond COVID, which we will be awaiting a second interview to talk about some more, which should probably be on the syllabus of many higher institutions of learning.
Could I just intervene a little bit? The only media that ever spoke about my last book, which was called Crisis and Promise in the Caribbean, was Win TV.
Thank you so much.
Some years ago.
Yes, I remember. Thank you so much. When you think about your career and you look at it's interesting that you said you've had one career but many platforms. What has been your favorite platform? If I dare ask you to choose, it's like looking at your children and picking a favorite.
Well, I came to realize that politics was an important platform.
Yes.
Because nothing happens without a political involvement. Became very much involved in that. In fact, I did not realize that I had so much of politics in my blood. Until I went to the University of Manitoba as a young student in my early 20s or thereabouts at the University of Manitoba in Canada. And I had to enter into the student politics as an international student in a large Canadian university and decided to fight for the presidency of the student body. And I did win, and that shocked me, but it gave me confidence.
Yes.
So when I came back to Trinidad, I said, you know, if I could have done this in a country which is not my own, I could probably do it in my own country.
Mr. Dookeran, one of the many things I have heard about you is your ability to be diplomatic and to be knowledgeable and to understand where things stand. And you were basically always referred to as a nice guy. Not in a bad way, but you know, he's a gentleman. And you were giving an interview about something that you felt passionately about, obviously, and you were strong in your language in terms of your perspective, and you felt that, you know, more needed to be done about, at the time, the economy of the country. And I remember hearing a colleague say, Dookeran is a fighter. And I laughed because it was said with such admiration, you know, so it was an interesting perspective to hear someone mention that about you, but, you know, he in his foot down now, he's like, this is it.
Yeah, well, you appeal to people different ways. So I'm happy that these people saw that side. I was making the point that in our political culture, we have a definition for a fighter.
Yes.
Anytime a fighter is not really a fighter, definition that we use. Because you could fight out of frustration, or you could fight out of a desire to make things different.
Yes.
And it's easier to fight out of frustration with a loud mouth than fight out of a desire to make things better with a soft voice.
Words to live by. Words to live by for sure. Mr. Dookeran, you know, we've come to the end of this interview. I definitely would like to speak with you some more. I'd like to say thank you so much for being a fighter, an author, a diplomat, a statesman, a public servant, you know, someone who we've really all looked up to as an example of how do we move through this space in the country that we're in and say to people, I am here because I think we could do better. Thank you so very much for your time today. And I will be looking forward to the book. We have to talk about that book when it comes out.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have met you again, Alan. And I hope we'll also have the opportunity to talk about our friend, Mohan Dookeran, at some time.
Definitely. We're prepping for that already. On behalf of everyone here at We News, I'm Nalan Hutt saying thank you so much for tuning in. Stay safe and have a pleasant day.